So good morning again, everybody. Welcome to Lynn on the Line. This is Lynn Gardner hosting the call, calling in from beautiful Virginia. It's kind of a interesting morning. We've had, like storms threatening, so it's cloud up and lots of winds and puffy clouds and then some blue sky in the middle of it. But it's always a beautiful day when we look at it that way, right? These days, I have been so incredibly busy. It's unbelievable. You think when you get older, things are going to slow down, but it certainly hasn't worked out for me, that way. I'm chasing a lot of things, some God things and business things, making a lot of sacrifices these days to achieve my goals and to be in service to the King. And I'm having to make some adjustments. I'm having to clear the path a little bit because in the middle of an already busy life, God has more things for me. So because I know that if I'm going to get where God wants me to be, then I have to be willing to do what I have to do. This personal challenge, if you will, inspired the message for you today entitled, How to Build a Side Gig into a Business. We talk a lot about having multiple streams of income in life. When you're self-employed, you're an entrepreneur. It's important to have that. Some of you have a paycheck. Some of you have a retirement check. Some of you have, different business sources of income. But the bottom line is, we need to find a need, and I found a need, a big need, and I'm filling it as fast as I possibly can. But that takes adjustments and the willingness for me to make some sacrifices. As you know, if you've talked to me for 30 seconds or more, you know that God is first, my family is second, and then comes my business. So God gets the first part of my day, of my life, before anything else. He comes first, and family gets, any part they want or need, right? I'm there for them. I'll always be there for them. And then my business gets shuffled and squeezed in accordingly within those 24 hours a day. Do I have to work this hard? Well, I do need to make a living. I don't apologize for that. But I desire to change lives, and I'm driven to build the kingdom. So I'm passionate about sharing the message, the good news, and I'm also passionate about building wealth so I can help that kingdom along. None of these things would be accomplished if I approach any of them, any goal casually. I remember back in the day, people will say, well, not back in the day, people will say to me, I wish I had the luxury of time. I wish, I could start my day off the way you start your day off. And I just kind of laugh because I say, when my house was full and I had 4 kids going here, there, and everywhere, and all that meant was I had to get up a little bit earlier to start my day off that way. So it doesn't go away. It's not because you're too busy that you don't have time for God. It's just that you don't carve it out. So I do have to work hard to accomplish all those goals. And again, I'm driven to build the kingdom. So and many people have big dreams and, of quitting their day job one day, for instance, or going to work, full time in their mission or their business, that they love. And you often hear me say, well, why aren't you? And I don't mean to simplify things. Don't get me wrong. You don't want to quit your job before you build your business, up to a sustainable level. It's not a wise thing to do. But it seems as though lots of people never get where they really want to go because they don't do what they need to do. So true, for most people, quitting their jobs, with little resources to fall back on would be a ridiculous thing to do. It's a risk they shouldn't take. But still, there's no stopping somebody from carefully calculating that move and to make sure that it happens. See, things in life, anything meaningful doesn't happen without sacrifice. It's interesting how we've evolved as a society. When I look at it, the older I get, the more amazed I am. Back in the old days, most people had a side gig. Back in the old days, it was a priority to have the man go out and be the provider, have the woman stay home and raise the children. And back in those days, those guys did anything they had to do. Most people had a side gig, a business, or some kind of side source of income, if you will, and they weren't afraid to work hard for their goal. Again, men, husbands, and fathers back in that day did whatever it took to provide so their wives could stay home with the kids. Their priorities were right, and they weren't afraid to put in the work. But when network marketing came along, and I'll use Amway because that's the first one I heard of. I think it's the first one. Doesn't matter. But when that came along, some people used it as a side gig to make a little bit of extra cash, and some people chased that dream and they caught it. And they put in the hard work for that side gig that would eventually replace their income so they could, cut their ties with an employer and get off to build wealth. But they committed night after night after night. You hear stories from these people, how they were on the road night after night. The whole family had to make a sacrifice to make that happen. And they didn't look at that as a side gig, but as a potential to live a bigger life. And they did what it took to get there. So where did that mindset go? It's kind of crazy. The more technology we have, the more things that we have that should make our jobs easier, the less time people seem to have. Where did it go? Where did that mindset go? Where did the time go? Everything in life, again, guys, requires sacrifice, from your relationships to your journey with your children to your journey in your faith, and most assuredly in a business. So today, everybody seems to have an excuse for why they aren't willing to make those sacrifices for those things. Same 24 hours a day, the same 24 hours a day they, worked with years ago. But today we seem to think that we don't have as much time, much less to building a side gig or a long-lasting business. And people can't see beyond that job. When you suggest that people put in the time and effort to build their side gig into a lucrative gig, they have far too many excuses to even count. I don't have time. I have kids. I have this. I have that, right? But many entrepreneurs find their success by growing just that side gig, defined as a side gig on the side that turns into something much bigger. In fact, it turns into what a lot of you talk about or dream about building. But, that side hustle, if you will, it isn't for everybody, but if you can find your drive and your energy to work on your business in your spare time, then you have what it takes to find your success with a side gig. If you have a side project, your business that you're passionate about, one that you've wanted to build into a bigger thing for a while, the good news is that you don't have to quit your job. You just have to take a leap forward, and you have to be willing to make the sacrifices it takes to get there. It's not going to be easy, but you can do it, just like the countless ones before you. First thing you have to do is lay a good foundation. Stepping out into the great unknown is not only dangerous, it's scary, right? But you can mitigate that risk by creating a solid plan before you start. You'll see me with almost everything. If you could follow me around for the last few decades, you would see me look at something, and I don't just, I want to run out of the gate like a racehorse, but I also set a plan. I need to have a plan of where I'm going because I want it to work. The great thing about that side gig is that it's one of the best ways to assess a business, if you will, giving you a chance to prove its viability before you jump into the deep end of the pool, before you quit your job, determining how much money you'll need to make per month in order to quit that job, and to decide how much income your side gig needs to be generating for it to be successful. If you haven't laid that out, guys, then, you really, you're having a good time, and maybe you're helping a few people along the way, but you're not building a business. Those are critical aspects to building a business. Then you got to put in the time. Again, prepare yourself for what's ahead. I won't lie, when you first start out, you have to put in a lot of hours, and lots of them, actually. And since you have a regular job, a lot of you maybe, you're also going to be working your job and growing your business all at the same time in your quote-unquote spare time. But, if you let life get in the way, life will gobble up every minute you have. So you've got to plan that spare time. You've got to schedule that spare time. You got to roll up your sleeves, and you got to do it. It does get easier as you move along. But, in the very beginning, one of the worst things that we can convince people to do is to get all excited and never really build a business. There's a way to build a business, the way to transition your side gig into a very lucrative business, and it doesn't happen by chance. And then you have to, be scaling the right way. When it comes to growing your business, you have to avoid the temptation to do crazy things. Maybe spending too much money into the venture. Maybe you spend a fortune in tools and gadgets and all kinds of stuff, maybe advertising and all that. You've got to take a look at it and scale it to size. Let me tell you something. I'm a master of building from the ground up with not a penny to your name. So there's a way to do that. If you have a will, the way, and you're willing to make a sacrifice, you don't need to be scaling up and spending fortunes, $10,000, $15,000 on devices and all this stuff that you're doing. Countless entrepreneurs have started out with absolutely nothing, and I could spend all day giving you examples of those people. So you test the waters, and then you scale your mission or your business, if you will, gradually if you can. But again, you need a plan, or you won't even know you need to scale. And then you need to avoid burnout. I'll tell you one thing, that's right where I'm teetering on right now because I've taken on so much. So I know how this thing rolls. I know how I roll. and I know I've got to do some, some carving out and some better management to avoid burnout. Burnout's a real risk when you start scaling up a business and working around the clock at your day job if you have one, and then trying to fit your side gig in around your hours can be exhausting. So we need to avoid that burnout and try to devote a few of your most productive hours to your company, right? And it's hard when you're working full-time. I know that. But aren't we all? Everybody's got something. Some people got a full-time life without a full-time paycheck. But it's difficult to scale when you're working, burning the midnight oil, if you will. So exhaustion leads to burnout. You want to be sure that you, schedule yourself to give yourself at least a day off to recharge and that sort of thing. And then you need to take the leap. Finally, at one point, you got to jump in deep into the pool. So keep in mind, there's never going to be a perfect time, to quit a job or to build a business. And at some point, you're going to have to just go for it. So if your business shows great promise, if it's burning within you, this is what you wake up excited thinking about, right? Then you need to, look at the details and let things fall into place by devoting more time to it. While we all love stories about people who, boom, they hit success overnight, left their job and all that with a, stroke of quote-unquote luck. For most of us, it's going to take time. It's going to take patience. It's going to take, being persevering, and it's definitely going to take the sacrifice of that time. We make sacrifices to build a business, especially for those of you carrying a job and a side gig all at the same time. But some sacrifices should be a no-brainer. Things like turning off the TV. I mean, really, seriously, guys, I'm not anti-TV, by the way, but I'm telling you, when you look at, a lot of people look at their lives between sports and entertainment, their Netflix, you'd be surprised at how many good, productive hours you're actually turning over to a television. Maybe you need to refrain from hanging out with friends as much as you do, or maybe you need to, give up a golf game or two. You're not going to find success unless you're willing to make some sacrifices. So in order to find your success without losing your treasures in life, remember, the time with the God of all creation should be at the top of your priority list, at least if you want to succeed in that way, right? And, of course, we don't sacrifice our families, and we don't want to do that. But, I've seen over and over again, where people would say to their families, listen, this is a short-term commitment. This is a sacrifice we all have to make to get to the end of the line. So there are some sacrifices you have to make, and it's a good idea to feel your significant other in on things like that, and certainly to talk to your children. For me, it was a priority. I wanted to be home for dinner every night with my family, and I did it. Most nights, 99.999%, right? And so I would cut my day off, to be honest with you. There's still a lot more work to do for me. So I would, do my entrepreneur thing. I would make it home. I would sit down with my family. I would pray with them, break bread with them, find out how their day was. It was a priority for me not to miss major events. I missed a lot of baseball practices, and yes, I would like to have been there too. But I can count on one hand the major events I missed in their lives while I was building an empire for them. Prioritizing life is the key to working and building that side gig or business, if you will. But so few people are willing to make the sacrifice to find the time to do it. We sort of gotten away from that work ethic. Again, when you go back to the way things used to be, where people were committed to working a full-time job and a part-time job. I did it. We gotten away from that. People almost think it's ridiculous. What, you want me to work more than in my 8 hours a day? They just don't want to do it. But it's that willingness to make some sacrifice on behalf of our family and ourselves and our future is what leads to success. So if you're serious about building your side gig, your business, if you will, then it's time to face the facts. It's time to look at going to, to make some of the sacrifices it's going to take to get there. And only you can answer that. Maybe you like the side gig. You just like the fun part of it, the passionate side of it, the people part of it, and there is nothing wrong with that. But what I find is 99% of the people I talk to hope to build it into something significant, but they're simply not making the sacrifices to get there. So, guys, everything in life, everything meaningful, everything worth its weight takes a whole lot of sacrifice. If you want a good relationship, there's going to be some sacrificing. If you want to raise healthy, wonderful, well-rounded children, it's going to take some sacrifices. And unfortunately, we don't even see people sacrificing a smartphone for their family. So how can they end up at the end of the day with good results? And certainly in our faith, you have to take sacrifices. Remember, I was talking about in the early days with my kids, I got up way before they got up so that I could have time with the living God. I sacrificed some sleep and some rest to be grounded and strong for the journey, And so we have to make that sacrifice for our faith and for our God, and certainly for our business. I'm not sure how we got way off track. I'm not sure what it is within people. We talk about why, we talk about passion, we talk about a vision board, we talk about a whole lot of stuff. But really what it comes down to is, are you willing to make the sacrifices for all the things meaningful in life? So I hope you will, guys. Set out that plan. Get on track. Schedule your time. Tell yourself, I've got these hours on these days, and I'm going to make them matter. So that's it for me today, guys. You guys go be blessed, and I'll see you next time on Lynn on the Line. Take care. Bye-bye.